Hello. I'm Arlena. And a few months ago, my mother told me my 75-year-old grandmother needed to toughen up. So they left her, alone, on a bench in the middle of a crowded shopping mall. No phone. No wallet. No way home. When I confronted them, they called me dramatic. When I exposed them, they called me a traitor. But what if I told you that wasn't even the worst thing they did? What if I told you they erased her from family photos, faked medical records, and tried to make the world believe she was simply losing her mind? They wanted her forgotten. They didn't expect her to speak. So how did one quiet grandmother become the voice that destroyed the story they built? Would you believe me if I told you it all started with a group text I was never added to? The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary drifted down the hall as I stepped into my mother's house in Lake Oswego. The evening light filtered through the tall windows, painting gold lines across the marble counter. From the sound of laughter coming from the dining room, it should have been an ordinary Friday dinner. But something in the air was off, thick, cautious, like everyone had agreed on something before I walked in. "Arlena, you're late again," my mother, Valora, said without looking up from the table. Her tone was clipped, the way she used to sound when she corrected me for being dramatic. "Traffic," I replied, forcing a smile. I slipped my purse onto the chair beside me and scanned the room. My father, Warren, sat at the head of the table, still wearing his golf sweater. My sister, Isolde, wore her usual camera-ready smile, and her husband Damon was scrolling through his phone under the table. Grandma Eudora was quietly folding a napkin, oblivious to the silent rhythm of glances darting across the room. The conversation paused for a fraction of a second when I sat down. Then it picked back up, but softer, as if someone had turned down the volume. I pretended to reach for my phone, checking for messages. My notifications were blank, but a small detail made my stomach tighten. Our family group chat, the Haydens, was gone. Completely missing. I opened my texts and scrolled. There were no messages from Mom, Dad, or Isolde for the last 3 days. "Did you guys rename the family chat or something?" I asked lightly. Valora gave a quick laugh that didn't sound like her. "Oh, that? Just some logistics. Nothing important." "Logistics?" I asked, half joking, half knowing. Warren's voice cut in before she could answer. "Let's enjoy dinner without turning it into another one of your investigations." He carved a piece of chicken, calm as a judge handing down a sentence. Something was being hidden, and I could feel it. I tried to focus on the food, on the normal rhythm of conversation, Isolde talking about her latest parenting podcast episode, Damon bragging about some brand deal. Grandma Eudora smiled gently, always polite, always smaller than she really was. Her hand shook a little as she reached for her glass of water. "You okay, Grandma?" I asked. "I'm fine, dear," she said, with that soft grace she carried from another generation. "Just tired. These days feel long." Isolde jumped in. "She's just too attached to routine. Mom and Dad were saying she needs more stimulation, more independence." Independence. The word hit me sideways. Damon nodded without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, resilience. It's healthy for older folks to stay active, do things on their own." Warren joined in, proud of the theory he must have rehearsed. "We've been reading studies about aging. It's not about comfort, it's about building grit." I looked from one face to another. Eudora's eyes darted between us, unsure if we were talking about her or someone else. My mother smiled, serene and practiced, like she was leading a seminar on good parenting instead of plotting something cruel. "Building grit," I said. "She's 75, Dad, not training for a marathon." "Arlena," Valora warned, voice low. "Don't start. We're trying to do what's best for her." I let the words sit there, my appetite dissolving. Something about the way they all agreed in unison, it was rehearsed. Pre-decided. After dessert, while everyone lingered over coffee, I helped clear the plates. Grandma tried to stand, but Mom gently pushed her back down. "We've got it, Mother. Rest your legs." When I carried the plates to the kitchen, Damon followed. "You okay?" he asked, too casually. "Why wouldn't I be?" He shrugged. "You just get worked up sometimes. You worry too much." "Maybe because someone in this house has to," I snapped. He smiled, cold and patronizing. "See? That right there. Sensitive. You always think there's a secret plot." When I turned back toward the table, I caught a glance, Valora's subtle shake of the head toward Isolde. The kind of signal you only notice when you're the one being excluded. I waited until Grandma went to the bathroom before cornering my mother in the kitchen. "What's going on, Mom?" "I'm not stupid. You've been having these logistics talks behind my back. What are you planning?" Valora didn't look surprised. She rinsed a glass and spoke like she was reciting a weather report. "We're taking Mom to the mall tomorrow morning." "Okay. And then we're going to let her find her own way home." I blinked. "What?" "She needs to toughen up, Arlena. She's gotten too dependent. She won't even walk to the mailbox alone. We're doing this to build her confidence." My chest went cold. "You're leaving a 75-year-old woman at a shopping mall." "She's not helpless," Valora said smoothly. "There are security people, cameras, she'll be fine." "That's insane," I said, louder than I meant to. "What if she gets lost? Or scared? Or—" Warren appeared in the doorway. "Enough. You always make everything into a crisis." "This is a crisis." I snapped. He set his jaw, voice dripping with calm disdain. "You've always been the soft one, Arlena. That's why you can't handle these things." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a slow breath and said, "If anything happens to her, it's on you. I'll make sure everyone knows it." Valora wiped her hands with a towel, like she was finished with the conversation. "Nothing will happen. You worry too much. It's exhausting." That word, exhausting, stuck like a thorn in my throat. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. Outside, the air was cool, carrying the scent of rain-soaked pine. The lights from the house glowed behind me, warm and false. My phone buzzed with a notification from the empty family chat, but when I opened it, there was nothing new. The thread was gone. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel too tight. Every stoplight felt longer than it should. My grandmother's face kept flashing in my mind, her small smile, her hands trembling slightly over her plate. She trusted them. She trusted us. By the time I got home, it was past 10. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the couch, trying to slow my thoughts. I texted Isolde, "This isn't right. Call me." No reply. I tried again, "Please, just tell me what Mom's doing tomorrow." Still nothing. The clock ticked toward midnight. I called Grandma's landline. It rang 7 times before the machine picked up. Her soft recorded voice said, "Leave a message, dear." I couldn't. I just whispered into the silence, "I'll see you tomorrow, Grandma." But even as I said it, something deep in me whispered back that maybe I wouldn't. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sound of the rain tapping against the windows. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that no one could possibly mean harm. But the house felt too quiet, the darkness too long. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the mall, its endless halls and flickering lights, and a woman's voice calling my name from somewhere I couldn't reach. I woke up to the sharp vibration of my phone on the nightstand. It was just after 7, the sky outside a pale gray streaked with morning rain. I blinked at the screen, half expecting another work email or one of those weekend spam texts. Instead, my eyes caught the headline in bold red letters from a local news alert: missing woman, 75, found confused and alone at Washington Square Mall. My chest tightened before I even opened it. The photo below was small and slightly blurred, but I knew that navy cardigan anywhere. Grandma's cardigan. I sat up so fast the sheet tangled around my legs. My breath came short and uneven. The words blurred on my screen as I whispered to no one, "No, no, no." I grabbed my keys from the counter and called Marcella while pulling on the first pair of jeans I could find. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert the moment she heard me. "Arlena. What's wrong?" "It's her," I said, struggling to get the words out. "They left her." I knew they'd do something stupid, but not this. "What happened?" "She's on the news, alone in the mall." My voice cracked. Marcella was quiet for a beat. Then, "I'll meet you there." I was out the door before she hung up. The drive blurred into flashes of wet asphalt and red lights that never seemed to turn green fast enough. My thoughts tangled. How long had she been there? What had they said to her? Why didn't she call me? Washington Square Mall looked almost serene from the outside, glass reflecting the cloudy sky, but the parking lot was a mess of flashing lights and curious onlookers. I parked crooked between two cars and ran. Inside, the air felt too cold, too sterile. A few shoppers stood near the food court, whispering. Police tape cordoned off one of the benches near a smoothie stand. 2 officers stood talking quietly to a mall security guard. And there, on that bench, was Grandma. Her shoes were mismatched, one brown loafer and one black flat. Her cardigan hung unevenly, the buttons wrong. She was holding her purse in both hands like it might disappear if she let go. "Grandma," I said, my voice breaking as I crossed the tape. One of the officers turned, but when he saw her face light up, he let me through. She looked up slowly, eyes glassy but trying to focus. "Arlena." "Oh, sweetheart, there you are." I knelt beside her, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I thought they just forgot me," she said, voice shaking. "Just for a minute. I didn't know whether to cry or scream." "Who did?" "Your mother, your father. They said they were getting coffee." I waited. Her gaze drifted to the window. It got crowded. I didn't want to move and miss them. My heart ached. "You didn't have your phone." "They said I should learn not to rely on it. That I'd remember better if I didn't use it all the time." A security officer approached. "Ma'am, she's been here for over 3 hours. We found her asking strangers if they could drive her home. No ID on her, just a few receipts." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Thank you," I managed. The air around us buzzed with the sound of police radios and the low murmur of people watching. I ignored them all. Then, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Arlena." I turned to see my mother walking quickly toward us, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. My father followed, looking irritated more than concerned. Valora's voice was syrupy, all contrition and charm. "Oh, thank God you found her. We were worried sick." The officer frowned. "You're her daughter." "Yes," she said sweetly. "Mom tends to wander. She must have walked off when we stopped for coffee." "That's not true," I said. "You left her." Warren's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and cold. "Enough, Arlena. Don't touch me, I snapped, stepping away. You abandoned her, and now you're lying to everyone here. Valora's smile didn't falter. Sweetheart, let's not do this here. Do what? Tell the truth. Her tone sharpened. We didn't mean for her to be frightened. Don't twist this into something ugly. Damon and Isolde arrived a few minutes later, breathless but polished, as if showing up for damage control. Damon went straight into diplomacy mode. It's just a misunderstanding. Let's not blow this up. The family's been under stress. I stared at him, incredulous. Under stress? You call this stress management? He gave that patronizing half-smile that always made me want to slap it off his face. You're upset. Understandably. But everyone here's trying to help. I looked at my grandmother, sitting small and silent under the fluorescent light, her hands trembling in her lap. That was help. The officers took statements, but without proof, there wasn't much they could do. Valora charmed them, my father nodded solemnly, and within half an hour they were walking Grandma toward the exit like everything was fine. I followed close behind, afraid if I let them out of my sight she might vanish again. In the car, Valora talked about errands, about getting groceries on the way home, as if the morning hadn't happened. Grandma sat in the back seat beside me, staring out the window. I caught her reflection in the glass, the tired lines on her face, the distant look in her eyes. When we reached her house, Valora ushered her inside with brisk efficiency, fussing over her sweater, her tea, her medication. I stood in the doorway, numb. Thank you, Arlena, Valora said lightly. For rushing over. You always assume the worst, but it's fine now. It's not fine. She turned, voice suddenly cold. Don't start this again. Warren stepped in, lowering his tone like he was dealing with a child. You need to stop accusing your mother. It's disrespectful. What you did to her was neglect, Dad. He straightened his sleeves. You don't know what that word means. I left before I said something unforgivable. By late evening, I was back at Grandma's, helping her settle into bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, where everything looks intact but nothing feels safe. I brushed her hair gently, untangling the small knots. Do you want to talk about what happened? She shook her head. No, dear. I'm just tired. Okay. I tucked the blanket under her chin. Her hand reached out and caught mine. Arlena, she said softly, if you don't speak up, I'll disappear. Quietly. Like I was never here. Her eyes shimmered, reflecting the lamplight. I wanted to promise her that she was wrong, that I would never let her fade. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just said, I hear you. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping gently against the window. I thought about the way my parents smiled at the police, how easily they lied, how quick they were to erase the truth. I didn't know it yet, but that day was the beginning of the end for all of us. I spent most of Sunday trying to convince myself I could just move on. But by evening, the lie collapsed under its own weight. Every time I looked at Grandma sitting quietly in her chair, knitting without really seeing the thread, I knew I couldn't let it go. That night's dinner was silent. My parents made small talk about the weather, about Warren's golf game, about anything that wasn't real. Grandma barely touched her food. When I tried to catch her eyes, she looked away, like she was hiding something, or afraid to look at me at all. When I got home, I started writing everything down. Dates, times, things people said, the way Grandma flinched when Mom raised her voice. I filled 3 pages before I realized I was shaking. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe the guilt of not stopping them sooner. Either way, I knew something was very wrong, and I wasn't imagining it. By Monday morning, the unease had settled into a sharp focus. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept replaying her words from the night before, "If you don't speak up, I'll disappear." It wasn't just fear. It was a warning. I called Marcella during lunch. "I can't shake this feeling," I said. "They're hiding something bigger than just a mistake." Her voice softened. "You don't sound paranoid, Lena. You sound like someone who's finally paying attention." We met that evening at a small cafe downtown. Marcella listened as I laid out every detail: the missing group chat, the toughen her up plan, the mall incident, even the way my mother turned every confrontation into an act of martyrdom. When I finished, Marcella leaned forward, lowering her voice. "That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was abandonment, plain and simple." "I know," I whispered. "But they've covered their tracks. They always do. Mom knows how to talk her way out of anything." "Then we stop relying on talk," she said. "You need evidence." The idea hit me like a slap. I'd been so focused on arguing, on begging them to see reason, that I forgot reason never worked with people who rewrote their own truth. Marcella pulled out her laptop. "Oregon has elder protection laws. If she's been neglected or put at risk, there are channels for that. You just need documentation." I stared at the screen as she navigated through the state's elder care site. The words mandatory reporting, negligence, endangerment jumped out like bright warnings. For the first time, I saw a path, not an easy one, but one that led forward. That night, back home, I opened my old tablet and logged into our shared family cloud. It had been months since I used it, mostly photos, recipes, and Dad's endless spreadsheets. The login still worked. I went straight to the archived chat history. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, buried under a folder titled Home Updates, I found a file called Archive 2022. It wasn't photos, it was a text log. Messages between Isolde and Mom. My pulse quickened as I scrolled. The conversation was casual, filled with family logistics, until one message stopped me cold. "Isolde, Mom's finally doing it. Damon, you sure the cameras reset every 48 hours? Isolde, Curtis says yes. By Monday, no one will see a thing." I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Curtis, probably the mall security guard. They'd planned it. It wasn't some impulsive lesson. It was calculated. I saved everything. Screenshots, metadata, timestamps. I even printed a few pages and tucked them into a folder labeled insurance papers. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. On Tuesday, I visited Grandma again. She looked smaller somehow, as if the days themselves were wearing her down. Mom hovered nearby, pretending to fluff the pillows, pretending to care. When Mom stepped out to take a call, Grandma whispered, "Your mother's been taking me to a doctor I don't know. He says I forget things, but I don't. I remember everything." "What doctor?" I asked gently. "I don't know his name. He said I signed something, but I didn't." My stomach turned. That evening, after I brought Grandma home, I called the clinic listed on her medication bottles. The receptionist hesitated when I asked for Eudora's records. "We'll need a written request," she said politely. "I'll bring it tomorrow." Wednesday morning, I dropped off the form myself. By the afternoon, an email arrived with a PDF of her file. I opened it expecting routine notes. Instead, I found phrases that made my skin crawl: progressive memory issues, mild cognitive impairment, recommend increased supervision. At the bottom of the page was the doctor's signature, Dr. Harold M. Franks. I blinked, recognizing the name. Dr. Franks had retired 2 years ago. The realization hit me like a punch. They'd forged the records. I printed the pages, the ink still warm, and laid them side by side on my dining table. My mother had faked medical notes to paint Grandma as senile. That way, if anything happened, if anyone questioned their actions, it would all look like a sad misunderstanding. I stared at the papers, fury boiling beneath my skin. Every lie they told had been premeditated, layered, perfect. They thought no one would notice. They thought I'd keep quiet. That night, I sat in the dark, the documents spread before me, and finally understood the size of what I was facing. This wasn't just about one cruel decision at a mall. It was about erasure, of a woman's dignity, of truth, of family. When my phone buzzed with a message from Mom, "Stop digging, Arlena. You're only hurting yourself." I didn't respond. I took a photo of the records instead, saved it to a hidden drive, and wrote in my notebook, "They want silence. I'll give them noise." The clock read midnight when I finally closed the folder. Outside, the rain had started again, steady and rhythmic, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. I looked at Grandma's scarf draped over my chair, the one she'd hidden from Mom. It smelled faintly of lavender and tea. It reminded me who I was doing this for. Now I had two options: stay quiet and be complicit, or make this public and lose everything. By Thursday, my coffee had gone cold 3 times before noon. I sat at my small dining table, the same one I'd grown up eating mac and cheese on, now covered in documents, printouts, and a worn legal pad filled with my handwriting. I didn't bother opening my laptop. I knew what I had to do. The only question left was when. After finishing a quick sandwich, I packed the folder with Eudora's falsified medical records and tucked it beneath a stack of old magazines on my desk. Not out of fear, it was just instinct. Years of being told I was overreacting had trained me to hide my convictions until they could no longer be ignored. That afternoon, I went back to Valora's house. I told her I needed to help Grandma with her laundry, and she didn't object, though her tone was tight, controlled, like a principal dealing with a difficult student. Eudora was sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her robe, staring out the window like she'd forgotten the difference between morning and afternoon. She barely acknowledged me when I sat beside her. "Did you eat anything today?" I asked. She nodded slowly, though the plate beside her was untouched. When Warren walked into the room unannounced, she stiffened. He said nothing, just looked at her for a moment and walked away. As soon as he left, she pulled her robe tighter around her and whispered, "I don't like it when he looks at me like that." "He's not going to hurt you," I told her. I wanted to believe that. "He doesn't have to," she murmured. "He just makes me feel used up." Later, while Eudora napped, I went into the living room and opened the family cloud on Valora's desktop computer. I'd set up that account years ago for photo sharing, birthdays, holidays, grandbabies. I clicked on the Family Trip 2017 folder. It opened, but something was wrong. No Eudora. She'd been in nearly every photo. Grandma posing next to the giant redwoods, Grandma blowing out birthday candles, Grandma holding baby Jake. But now, she was missing. Either cropped out or deleted. I opened more folders. 2018, gone. 2019, gone. 2020, replaced entirely by filtered pictures of Isolde and Damon's kids in coordinated outfits. It was as if someone had taken a scalpel to our family history and cut her out piece by piece. I checked the recycle bin. Empty. Whoever did this had been thorough. I took a screenshot of the folder list and emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Proof of digital erasure." When I returned to Eudora's room, I found her awake, staring at the old picture frame on her nightstand. The photo inside, her wedding day, faded but intact, was the only image she had left untouched. They took the rest, she said quietly. Said we needed to make room. I sat beside her, took her hand, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. That evening, Valora caught me in the hallway. Her arms were crossed, and her smile was brittle. "You've been digging," she said. "I found the photo archives," I replied. "Or what's left of them." Her tone sharpened. She didn't even like being photographed. She always said she looked tired. "She said she looked tired because you said it first," I snapped. "You erased her because you were embarrassed to be seen with someone fading." Valora stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's old, Arlena. Let the kids shine now." That sentence hit me harder than any slap ever could. I stood there, staring at the woman who raised me, and realized I didn't know her at all. "She raised you," I said. "And you've decided she doesn't matter anymore." "She's had her time," Valora said coldly. "Now don't come into my home acting like you understand everything." "I understand more than you think," I told her, and walked out without waiting for a response. I drove home with my windows down despite the chill. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, wasn't making this up, wasn't just the soft one. Back at my apartment, I pulled out the only physical copy of a picture I had of Grandma, one taken during a quiet Sunday afternoon on my balcony, both of us laughing over burnt cookies. I pinned it to my fridge. It wasn't framed. It wasn't filtered. But it was real. I opened the family cloud drive again and clicked Leave folder. A pop-up asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Then, I created a new folder titled, She Still Exists. I uploaded the burnt cookie photo, the screenshots from the chat logs, the forged medical records. Not for anyone else. Not yet. But for me. So that when the time came, I'd be ready. Later that night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights blink one by one as people turned in. In that moment, I didn't feel sad. I felt certain. Valora wanted a family without wrinkles, without weakness, without witnesses. She'd built a curated legacy. But I remembered everything. And for the first time, I didn't care about being the good daughter anymore. By the time Saturday morning rolled around, I was already awake before the alarm buzzed. I hadn't slept much the night before anyway. My eyes burned, my stomach was tight, but there was a strange calmness sitting beneath all of it, like my body finally understood we were done playing along. The email invitation came on Thursday. Valora called it a family check-in brunch. Neat. Polished. Strategically vague. The kind of language you use when you don't want to admit someone's been caught doing something wrong. I didn't respond to it. I didn't need to. We both knew I'd show up. When I parked outside the house, the driveway was already full. Isolde's sleek SUV gleamed in the morning sun, and Dad's Cadillac sat smugly beside it. The hedges were too neatly trimmed. The lawn looked freshly edged. I paused at the front door, gripping the folder in my purse like it was armor. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and coffee, deceptively warm. Valora stood at the kitchen island, arranging pastries on a tiered tray like we were hosting high tea, not staging a showdown. "Arlena," she greeted me, voice smooth as always. "You made it." "Good." She didn't hug me. She didn't even look me in the eye. I didn't bother faking politeness. I stepped past her into the dining room. Isolde sat primly at the end of the table, legs crossed, one manicured hand cradling a mimosa. Damon stood beside her, tapping away at his phone, likely crafting some carefully worded post for his social media brand. Warren, of course, sat at the head of the table with his newspaper and a mug that read, "Best Grandpa Ever." I tried not to gag. "Before we eat," Valora said as she entered, wiping her hands on a dish towel, "I think we should address the tension that's been in the air lately." There it was. Rehearsed. Scripted. She'd probably written it out like a sermon. "We feel," she continued, gesturing between herself and Warren, "that you've been stirring unnecessary drama, Arlena. Especially around your grandmother." I didn't speak. I wanted to hear all of it. Isolde chimed in, her voice falsely gentle. "We're worried, Lena. About you. About how you're handling things. You're putting Grandma in the middle of something she doesn't need to be dragged into." I raised an eyebrow. "Dragged? You left her at a shopping mall." Warren's voice cut in like a cleaver. "Lower your voice." "Why?" I said, finally looking directly at him. "Does the truth sound too loud?" Damon set his phone down and stepped forward, palms open. "Let's not get legal, okay? We're family. We can handle this like adults." And that was the moment I knew they were bluffing. That fear in Damon's voice wasn't about civility. It was about exposure. "Oh," I said, reaching into my purse, "we're already there." I pulled out the folder and set it on the table. Slowly. Deliberately. I opened it and slid out a series of pages, screenshots, printouts, highlighted phrases. "This is from the cloud chat you deleted. Here's Isolde saying, 'Mom's finally doing it.' Here's Damon asking about the camera reset schedule." Isolde's face drained of color. I placed another page down. "This is a screen capture of the photo folders you wiped clean, years of pictures where Grandma just vanished. Convenient, right?" Valora's mouth opened, but no words came. "And this," I said, sliding the forged medical file across the table, "is a record signed by a doctor who retired in 2021. A record stating Grandma has memory issues she's never been diagnosed with. That's a felony, by the way." Warren stood, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Where did you get that?" "I asked the clinic," I replied. "And I still remember how to read a timestamp." Isolde pushed her mimosa away, lips trembling. "You went through our files. You destroyed hers." For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that cracks ceilings. Then Valora collected herself and smiled that same brittle smile. "You've always needed an enemy to feel important, Arlena. It's exhausting." "No," I said, standing straight. "What's exhausting is watching you pretend to be the victim while erasing the only person in this family who ever showed me kindness." Damon cleared his throat. "We were hoping to handle this privately, but since you're choosing war." And then he gestured. From the hallway, a man stepped into the room, suit and tie too stiff for a Saturday morning. He carried a briefcase and a stack of manila folders. "This is Gregory Shaw," Damon announced. "Our attorney." I smiled. And for the first time in weeks, it wasn't forced. "Well, Mr. Shaw," I said, gathering my papers back into the folder. "You'll be hearing from mine." I walked out without finishing the bagel I hadn't touched. The air outside felt different, cooler, sharper. Like it had been waiting for me to finally stop letting them set the temperature. Driving home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tremble. I played the radio, let the static play between stations, and thought about Grandma's voice telling me she'd disappear if I didn't speak up. No more disappearing. Not on my watch. The courthouse was quieter than I expected for a Monday morning. The rain had washed the air clean, and the stone steps glistened as I climbed them, folder tucked tightly under my arm. I didn't wear makeup or heels. I didn't want to look like someone performing courage, I wanted to be it. The glass doors opened with a soft whoosh, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with paper and old coffee greeted me. For a long second, I just stood there, watching people move through the security line, lawyers with briefcases, a young couple holding hands, a man arguing quietly with his mother. Everyone was there for something that mattered. And so was I. Filing this report meant cutting the final thread tying me to the people who raised me. But after everything they'd done, I couldn't keep pretending we were still a family. I found the elder abuse office on the 3rd floor, tucked between 2 courtrooms. The walls were an unremarkable beige, the kind that never aged, never offended anyone. I filled out the form slowly, each checkmark feeling like it drew blood. Name of victim, Eudora Hayes. Relation to victim, granddaughter. Nature of abuse, neglect, abandonment, falsified medical documentation. There was a box for describe the incident. My pen hovered for a moment before I began to write. Left alone at Washington Square Mall for several hours. Family members fabricated medical records to portray her as cognitively impaired. Victim expresses fear and emotional withdrawal in presence of primary caretakers. When I finished, my handwriting slanted, uneven. I reread it once. Then I signed my name. Every letter felt like a confession, but not of guilt. Of truth. I walked the form up to the front desk. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and pink reading glasses, looked it over without expression. We'll assign an investigator within 48 hours, she said. You'll be contacted for follow-up. Her tone was procedural, but her eyes softened when she looked at me. These things are hard, she said. But it's good you're doing something. Marcella was waiting for me in the hallway, leaning against the wall with 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one and smiled faintly. So. You did it. I did. Do you feel better? No, I admitted. But I feel right. She nodded, as if she understood that those weren't the same thing. We sat together on the courthouse steps, watching the traffic crawl by. You're doing the right thing, she said. Even if no one claps for you today. I managed a laugh. Especially if they don't. The clouds parted briefly, sunlight catching the wet concrete like glass. It was one of those tiny, defiant moments the universe throws you when it knows you're about to break. By evening, my phone had turned into a weapon. 20 missed calls. 11 voicemails. 16 text messages, all from variations of the same 3 names, Mom, Dad, Isolde. The first few were guilt. You're destroying this family, Arlena. Then came shame. How could you do this to your mother? After everything we've done for you. And finally, threats disguised as concern. You're overreacting. This could ruin us all. I deleted every one of them without replying. Then I blocked their numbers. There was no room left in me for explanations. I'd spent years trying to translate cruelty into misunderstanding, selfishness into stress, lies into love. It was time to stop interpreting and start acting. Around 8 that night, the phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity made me listen right after. Hello, Miss Hayes, the voice said, polite, professional. This is Karen Lopez from Adult Protective Services. We'd like to schedule an interview with your grandmother sometime this week, if possible. Please call back at your earliest convenience. I called her the next morning. By Wednesday afternoon, an appointment was set. When the day came, I arrived at Grandma's house early, making sure she was comfortable, that she'd eaten. She moved slower now, her hands trembling as she folded napkins that didn't need folding. Someone's coming to talk to you today, I said gently. They just want to make sure you're okay. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. She nodded, eyes far away. Your mother won't like it. I know, I said quietly. But that's not who this is about anymore. Valora wasn't home when the caseworker arrived. A small mercy. Karen was younger than I expected, early 30s, calm voice, steady posture. She introduced herself to Eudora, who greeted her politely but guardedly. They sat together in the living room while I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up while listening to every word. Do you feel safe living here, Mrs. Hayes? Karen asked softly. Eudora hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the door where Valora usually appeared without warning. She didn't answer. Karen tried again. Has anyone ever left you somewhere alone? Another pause. Then, a fragile voice, they said it was to help me be strong. My throat tightened. Karen nodded, writing something down. And do you feel they take good care of you? This time, Grandma didn't even try to speak. She just looked out the window, her face calm but her jaw trembling. That silence filled the room, thick as fog. When the interview ended, Karen thanked her and handed me her card. We'll be in touch, she said. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes lingered, knowing more than her words allowed. After she left, I helped Grandma back to her chair. She looked so small there, surrounded by photo frames that no longer held her image. Did I do okay? She asked. You did perfect, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She smiled faintly, the kind that hides more pain than it reveals. You always were the strong one. I sat beside her and took her hand. I learned from the best. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't really want and sat on my porch, letting the night settle around me. I could feel the shift in the air, the quiet before something big breaks. Filing the case was the first domino. I didn't know how many would fall after, but I knew the direction they were going. I looked at my phone, now mercifully silent, and thought of Marcella's words outside the courthouse. No one was clapping. No one would. But I was still standing. And then, 3 days later, the footage leaked, not by me, but by someone who'd seen too much. It started with a buzz on my phone. Then another. And then my inbox lit up like a fire. I was folding laundry when Marcella's name flashed across the screen with no message, just a link. The title stopped me mid-reach, surveillance footage surfaces from Washington Square Mall. I clicked. There, grainy but unmistakable, was the image, my mother, Valora, and my father, Warren, walking briskly out of the mall's south exit. My grandmother was seated alone near the food court, glancing around, holding her purse like a life preserver. She tried standing up once, then sat back down. The caption read, "Who leaves their own mother behind like this?" Within an hour, the video had over 20,000 shares. By sunset, it was viral. I didn't leak it. That wasn't me. But I knew exactly who had, and I would thank Curtis later. The clip was silent, but it didn't need words. You could see it in Valora's face, the forced smile as she adjusted her scarf. You could see Warren checking his watch. They didn't look concerned. They didn't glance back. The comments section exploded. This is abuse, plain and simple. They should be arrested. Elder neglect isn't just sad, it's criminal. That poor woman. She looks terrified. My name wasn't mentioned, not yet. But people started digging. Internet sleuths always do. By evening, local bloggers were posting summaries of the legal complaint I'd filed. Some of it was accurate. Some of it was sensationalized. I kept quiet. I didn't retweet. I didn't comment. I didn't feed the flames. I let the truth burn on its own. By Tuesday morning, reporters were calling. My voicemail filled up by noon. Marcella fielded half of them, politely declining interviews, but I knew it wouldn't be long before someone showed up at my door. At work, coworkers whispered but didn't approach me directly. A few left post-it notes of quiet support. One woman from HR handed me a cup of tea and said, "My aunt went through something like this. She never had the guts to speak up. You're doing something most people wouldn't." That held me for about 10 minutes. Then the real backlash started. Valora called first. I didn't pick up. Then came the voicemail. "You ungrateful little girl," she spat. "You've always wanted to ruin us. Well, congratulations. You finally did. You think the internet knows better than your own family." Next, Warren. "You made your mother cry. Is that what you wanted? You've turned this family into a circus. All because you couldn't keep quiet." Isolde took to Instagram. She posted a photo of her holding her daughter, both in matching sundresses, with the caption, "We love hard." Some just don't understand what loyalty means. The likes rolled in. The comments too. "Stay strong, Isolde. Don't let toxic people dim your light." I didn't even feel anger. Just exhaustion. By afternoon, the phone calls turned into text messages. My uncle from Kansas. My second cousin I hadn't heard from in years. Even old family friends chimed in. "Arlena, this isn't the way. Your mom always talked so highly of you. Why would you do this to her? You're making her look like a monster. She's not." I blocked every number. One by one. By the end of the day, I'd lost count. That night, the silence in my apartment wasn't peace, it was pressure. I stared at my ceiling fan, the blades spinning endlessly, as if trying to sweep away the noise I'd let in. Was I wrong? Was I overreacting? What if no one ever looked past the headline? What if all they remembered was that I turned on my own mother? I tried to eat something but gave up after 2 bites. My stomach was a knot. By 9 o'clock, I found myself on the floor of my living room, papers spread out, documents everywhere, the image of Grandma alone at the mall looped in my head like some cruel screensaver. I wrapped myself in a blanket and let the questions flood in. Had I just destroyed what little family I had left? Would Grandma even forgive me for dragging this out into the light? Would she even want me to? At 10:30, a knock at the door pulled me back. I didn't answer right away. Then came the second knock. Soft. Rhythmic. Marcella. I opened the door, and she didn't say a word. She just walked in, set a plastic bag of Thai takeout on the counter, and poured 2 glasses of water. When we sat down, she said, "You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." "I haven't," I said. She took a bite of pad CEW, then looked me in the eye. "They've done everything to silence you, except prove you wrong." I blinked. "Think about it," she continued. "Have they offered a single explanation that wasn't manipulative? Have they denied the footage? Denied the forgery? Denied any of it?" I shook my head. "They're not fighting the facts," she said. "They're attacking you. That's what people do when the truth is on your side, and they can't stomach it." I let the words settle. "Arlena," she said softly, "you're not the villain here. You're just the one holding up a mirror." We ate in silence after that. But it was the kind of silence that didn't suffocate, it soothed. By midnight, I finally felt steady enough to stand. I walked to my fridge and stared at the photo of Grandma and me, still stuck there with a magnet shaped like Oregon. She had laughed so hard that day, tears ran down her face. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in months. And I wasn't going to let them erase it. Not now. Not ever. But I wasn't the one who blew the door open. That came from a voice they never expected, my grandmother's. The email arrived late Wednesday night. I was rinsing out my mug when I saw the notification pop up, a forwarded message from a local elder advocacy group. Subject line, Community Town Hall, Public Stories Welcome. The event was scheduled for the following Monday, open mic format. Survivors, family members, professionals, anyone with something to say. I hadn't signed us up. I hadn't planned to attend. But the next morning, while I helped Eudora lace up her walking shoes, something she insisted on doing herself, she glanced at me and asked, "Can I speak there?" I froze. "At the town hall," she added. "You said it was open to the public." I looked up from her shoelaces, stunned. "Grandma, are you sure?" Her hands trembled just slightly. "It's time I said something. It's time people knew what happened." That moment knocked the breath from my chest, not because I doubted her strength, but because after everything, she still believed her voice mattered. I sent a reply to the organizer that afternoon. On Monday, I picked her up an hour early. She wore her best cardigan, the one with the faded blue buttons, and I brought along her cane and a thermos of chamomile tea. Her silence on the ride over wasn't heavy. It was intentional. Focused. The same way she used to get before baking a complicated pie crust. The community center auditorium was modest, maybe 50 seats, a small wooden stage, and a single standing microphone. Folded chairs filled slowly with strangers, some young, some gray-haired, some with expressions I recognized in my bones, people who'd carried too much in silence for too long. I was ready to tell her she didn't have to do it, that we could leave, that no one would blame her. But she tapped my hand and said, "Let me go first. Before I get scared." When they called her name, Mrs. Eudora Hayes, she gripped the armrest, took a breath, and stood. The room hushed. Marcella, seated beside me, gave my hand a squeeze. Eudora took the stage with grace. Each step was measured but steady. She reached the microphone and paused, resting her fingers gently on the stand. "My name is Eudora Hayes," she began, voice soft but deliberate. "I am 75 years old. No paper. No notes. Just her. My daughter left me in a place I didn't know. A shopping mall. She told me she was going to get coffee. But she didn't come back." A ripple moved through the room. "At first," she continued, "I thought it was my fault. That maybe I had misunderstood. That I was too slow. Too forgetful. That maybe I deserved it." She looked up then, eyes wet but steady. "But I remember. I remember everything. I remember how she looked at me when she walked away. Like I was an old suitcase she didn't want to carry anymore." The room was silent except for one muffled gasp from the back. "They told people I had memory problems. That I needed to learn independence. But that's not what they wanted. They didn't want me to be strong. They just didn't want me to need them." That sentence landed like thunder. Eudora nodded once, as if to herself, then whispered, "I was left behind. But I am still here." When she turned to walk off stage, the room rose with her. Not just polite applause. A standing ovation. Real, gut-deep respect. Someone started recording halfway through, and I knew, without question, that video would spread. She sat down beside me and exhaled like she'd just let go of 50 years of air. "You were incredible," I told her. "I said what needed to be said," she replied. "And I'm not afraid anymore." The moment we got home, I checked my email. Buried between newsletters and junk was a message with no subject line. It was from Curtis, the mall security guard. I saw the footage, the message began. I also heard what your grandmother said. I'm ready to talk. We met that Thursday afternoon at a quiet diner off Burnside. He showed up in uniform but off-duty, hat tucked under his arm, eyes scanning the room like muscle memory. When he sat down, he slid a thumb drive across the table. That's the full log. The footage. Audio snippets. Time-stamped, he said. I stared at it. You kept a backup. I always keep backups, he said. Especially when someone tries to buy my silence. He told me that Warren had approached him 2 days after the mall incident. Said he wanted to smooth things over in exchange for a thank you envelope. Curtis hadn't taken it, but he'd recorded the conversation. On the drive was the audio, Warren offering cash, requesting discretion, downplaying the entire event as a misunderstanding. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Finally, proof that couldn't be erased. Will you testify? I asked. He nodded. Whatever she needs. I called my attorney the next morning. On Friday afternoon, we filed a formal civil suit, elder abuse, falsification of records, emotional negligence. The courthouse lobby was full of people that day, but I only noticed one, Valora, standing near the clerk's desk, flipping through documents like it was just another errand. She hadn't seen me yet. When she finally did, it took her a second to register what was happening. Then the papers were handed to her by a uniformed server, and I watched her eyes widen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Cameras weren't allowed inside the building, but someone near the exit took a picture, a perfect shot of her holding the envelope, expression frozen between confusion and fear. No one stepped forward to comfort her. Not Warren. Not Isolde. Not even the receptionist she always tried to impress with her overly loud phone calls. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. Marcella met me outside with a hot coffee and her usual no-nonsense nod. How'd it feel? Necessary, I said. And overdue. She handed me the coffee. Then it's time to finish what you started. That night, Grandma and I sat on my couch, watching old episodes of Jeopardy while she rested her feet on a heating pad. I told her everything, about Curtis, about the testimony, about the civil suit. She listened quietly, then said, they always thought I was too weak to speak. But you gave me the voice. No, I said. You gave it to yourself. I just helped hand you the mic. We laughed softly at that. A real laugh. Not bitter. Not hollow. It had been a long time since we'd had a night like that, quiet, comfortable, free of ghosts. Some stories don't end in screams, they end in silence, and that's how you know they finally heard you. After the civil suit was filed, things unraveled faster than I expected, and quieter. No dramatic courtroom scene, no cameras flashing. Just a sealed agreement. Legal language wrapped in confidentiality clauses and non-disclosure lines that tried to make it all feel clinical. But even sealed truth weighs something. Valora disappeared from public life shortly after. No more momfluencer posts. No more brunches with charity boards. No official apology, no explanation. Just gone. Warren followed her lead. He cancelled his golf trips, put the house on the market, and stopped responding to everyone outside of a lawyer's office. I didn't see them again. The money from the settlement wasn't flashy. Just enough to ensure Grandma could live with dignity, safe, cared for, never dependent on Valora again. I didn't throw a party. I didn't open champagne. I just exhaled. And then, slowly, life began again. 2 months passed. Leaves turned the color of rust and cider, and the quiet in my apartment became something I welcomed instead of feared. I started volunteering at a senior resource center twice a week. Nothing complicated, helping with paperwork, organizing lunch menus, checking in on residents who didn't get many visitors. Some days, I painted with Grandma on the porch. Her arthritis made her lines shaky, but she still loved colors, especially soft yellows and lavender. We'd paint bowls of fruit, birds on branches, silly little things. It wasn't about skill. It was about time, about staying present. Marcella and I launched our little group at the end of October. We called it Boundaries and Bloodlines. Just 5 people at first, all of us sitting in folding chairs in the back room of the community center. But by the 3rd week, we had 12. Then 20. They came with different stories, some from toxic parents, some from grown children who manipulated them, some from spouses who used the word family like a leash. But the pattern was always the same, being made to feel guilty for asking to be treated like a human being. I never shared our full story. Not publicly. But I listened. I offered what I could. One Saturday afternoon in November, I was setting up coffee for the group when I heard a knock at my apartment door. I opened it, surprised. Bella. Isolde's daughter. She stood there awkwardly, hair in a messy bun, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and nodded. "Of course." We sat on the couch. She fidgeted with the zipper of her bag for a few seconds before pulling something out, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. "I made this," she said. "For school. But I wanted you to have it." I untied the string and slowly unwrapped the paper. It was a painting. 3 women. One older, in a soft lavender sweater. One younger, seated beside her with dark hair and a gentle expression. And one standing behind them, in a red jacket, hands resting on both shoulders. There were no names. No explanation. But I didn't need one. "This is beautiful," I said, blinking back sudden tears. She smiled, small and sincere. "I know Mom wouldn't be okay with me coming here. But I wanted you to know I still think about you. A lot." I hugged her. Longer than I probably should have. When she left, she said, "You feel like the only grown-up who ever told the truth." I hung the painting above my desk. No frame. Just tacked in place, like it belonged there. That evening, I opened my computer and clicked through a folder I hadn't touched in weeks. The one labeled Incident Archive. There it was again. The grainy security footage. Valora and Warren walking away. Grandma left behind. I didn't watch it this time. I just moved it into a new folder, done. Then I clicked open a different one, just a simple photo. Grandma and me in the backyard, holding mugs of tea. Marcella blurred in the background, laughing about something. That was the picture that stayed. People still ask me what happened. They ask gently, carefully. Some with curiosity, some with concern, some with that polite nosiness only extended family can perfect. "What happened with your parents?" I tell them the truth. They raised me. And then they raised the bar for what I would never accept. I don't miss them. Not in the way people want me to. I miss the idea of them. The version that never really existed outside of childhood stories and holiday cards. But even that morning feels distant now. Now, I focus on what I've built, a life that isn't perfect, but is honest. A home where silence doesn't mean fear. A routine that includes quiet coffee, bad paintings, and the occasional support group with people who know what it feels like to be unwanted by blood. The truth is, some families are built. And sometimes, the strongest ones are built from the pieces others threw away. Sometimes, the strongest families aren't the ones you're born into, but the ones you build when nobody else stays. Sometimes, it takes one act of cruelty to reveal a lifetime of silence, and one voice to finally break it. If you've ever been the quiet one, in your family, the one who saw everything but said nothing, ask yourself, when is enough enough? Families aren't just built on blood. They're built on respect, protection, and love that doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. If this story struck a nerve, tell me why in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more